2026 is seeing a more volatile global order, with the American forces entering Venezuela and capturing President Maduro, Trump's warning to Iran, and now the new threat of capturing Greenland.
Trump administration is openly saying that, look, this is the world in which power is respected. Power governs. If you see Mr. Trump himself, if you read him before his elections, in his first term, he sounded very isolationistic.
Yes.
But in operations, he was not. The way he has gone into Middle East, for example, in Gaza, where he's now building a board of peace, or whether in Iran, where he said at one point that I'm coming.
What's the kind of engagement or the level of engagement that we can see, American engagement in Iran?
Iran is not Venezuela. Iran has options for retaliation. Venezuela, of course, it was a specific task that they were doing, taking Maduro out of Venezuela. Iran has always been a very interesting and important factor in US-India relationship. You can think of China, right? China in Venezuela. What did China do?
Power rules, power governs. That has been the guiding principle that America has followed.
Money by power and money by governance power of the world.
Hello and welcome. I'm Naghma. The year 2025 brought about unprecedented disruptions in global geopolitics. Return of Trump to White House has resulted in significant churn in various strategic theaters across the world. But the year 2026 is seeing a more volatile global order, with the American forces entering Venezuela and capturing President Maduro, Trump's warning to Iran, and now the new threat of capturing Greenland, thus angering and almost threatening Europe, is looking at many new renegotiations. What is happening now is looking like an unraveling of the old established order, which also was primarily serving America, but this is the time of new negotiations and new disruptions. And this is how the world looks like in a lot of turmoil. Welcome to the Ideas Factory. The year 2026 began with a bang, and this is the first Ideas Factory that we are doing in 2026. A very warm welcome to you, Harsh. Nobody had expected what will happen in 2026, but it started with the American forces entering Venezuela, capturing Maduro, and then President Trump now threatening the full capture of Greenland, then the volatile situation that we are seeing in Iran. So there's a lot happening already. We are, around 19 days into 2026? So the big question everyone is asking is, what is happening? Actually, people say, what the hell is happening? So how do you understand this?
Thank you, Naghma, and a very happy new year to you. I think ever since Mr. Trump came to office in 2025, it has been a roller coaster, and suddenly that roller coaster has entered into an extremely even more turbulent waters in 2026. But I think in some ways it's it's very difficult to understand at times, and even more difficult to predict as to where this is going to go. But one thing is clear, that that in so many fundamental ways, this is an inflection point in global politics. This is the way alliances, relationships, interstate relations, multilateral institutions, international law, all of those things that we presumed would make the global order go in a certain way have suddenly become more difficult to comprehend and have taken on a trajectory which is as difficult to comprehend as it is to predict.
And very unpredictable.
Yes, I mean, is there a method to this madness? I think essentially that's the question.
And it has also eroded all those established trusts and partnerships and alliances.
Exactly. I think if we are talking of, European leaders are openly talking of the end of NATO. So you can imagine the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was created in 1945 after the end of the Second World War. In so many ways, it established the global order. It laid the foundations of post-World War II global order. And if that is coming crashing down, if there are challenges to it, if the challenges are to transatlantic relationship, the way we have not seen America imposing tariffs on its European partners over Greenland, and Europeans saying that we will go full trade bazooka as they say, with all the all the retaliation at their disposal against
So Europe
US.
is also waking up now, and Europe has to recalibrate its partnership.
At so many different levels. It's economically, security-wise, normatively. So I think this certainly, if there is no such thing as the West, quote unquote, the West left, then I think it does tell you that we are entering the end of one epoch in global politics, and we're moving into another.
So if we are moving to another epoch in global politics, the liberal international order that the US actually helped create after World War II, that itself is now getting eroded, and we can say that there is an unraveling of this order and new negotiations are needed, or probably new negotiations are happening. And the question is now, what are those new negotiations? Where will it lead? What is happening right now? Because Americans say and feel that they have to reestablish their place in the world, which was unfair to them. That's how Donald Trump puts it, that he's taking control of the world again.
Yes, in some ways, it is counterintuitive, because America had been the dominant player. But I think, had been the dominant player since the end of the Second World War. And still, if you were to assess American role in the world, you would say that, yes, it may not be the unipolar moment of 1990s, but certainly America is one of the key powers in global politics, and the predominant power in so many domains still remain true. But I think the way many in America, Mr. Trump and his base, see the rise of China, perhaps, or the way America has been denuded of its manufacturing capability over a period of time, the way in which the economic health of America has gone down relative to others. Perhaps that means that for many in the US, this is a moment of recalibration. And, in some ways, one can understand that argument, that if the argument is simply that America wants to reassess, look inwards, has been too overambitious in charting a course in global politics, Afghanistan, Iraq, West Middle East, and Indo-Pacific. If it wants to look inwards, if it wants to consolidate its economic and military might, that's an argument that is understandable to many, even in America's partners and allies. But I think the way in which Mr. Trump has gone about articulating it and operationalizing it, this sense that, look, of course, Western Hemisphere has always been America's backyard.
Yes.
So in some ways, this whole idea that external powers in Western Hemisphere there's been a long-standing tradition from Monroe Doctrine to Cuban Missile Crisis and then to Mr. Trump. So you can chart that course out. But if you say that in the process we don't need partners, we don't need European, the closest of your allies, we don't need any institutions that we ourselves have created, and we will use force, which Trump administration is openly saying that, look, this is the world in which power is respected. Power governs. So we want to be, we want to demonstrate our power, and we want to get things through the sheer will of force of power. So I think that's a very different argument to what the argument that Americans have made in the past, American leaders have made in the past. They had also continued to seek dominance, but I think the method was very different. And I think that's where the essential debate is.
Like you say, power rules, power governs. That has been the guiding principle that America has followed. But like you point out, the difference is the method, the way it is said, right? So that is different right now. And when you say that America is recalibrating, the question is also, why does it need to recalibrate now? What went wrong? What is happening there? And when we talk about America looking inwards, is it going back to its age-old, the beginning of the foreign policy of isolation? Is it going back there?
I think there are two issues here. One, I don't think that isolationism per se of the kind that Americans have witnessed or exuded in the past, that's an option for an America that wants to seek advantages wherever it can from the international order. So I don't think that kind of isolationism is certainly there is a strand there, but I don't think that's certainly feasible. If you see Mr. Trump himself, if you read him before his elections, he even in his first term, he sounded very isolationistic.
Yes.
But in operations, he was not. I mean, he in his first term, he resurrected Quad. In his second term, of course, he has, in the way he has gone into Middle East, for example, in Gaza, where he's now building a board of peace, or whether in Iran, where he said at one point that I'm coming and
help is on its way.
So I think he has not been that kind of an isolationistic leader that perhaps some of his earlier commentary, some of his earlier ideas would signify. But certainly, the sense that wherever possible, America should get a better deal. Wherever possible, the inherent transactionalism that is always there in interstate relations should be more overt, and America should be benefiting from its partners. America should be benefiting from the system that it has created, and the fact that it has not benefited is the reason why we are doing certain things that we are doing.
That's the excuse, or that's the logic that they give, and they're actually playing the victim too.
Yes,
and we've not got our due.
Absolutely, and I think in some ways, one also has to, will have to be a bit cautious, because we don't, while he is the dominant figure at this point, and of course, he is the executive head, and so he has enormous power. But whether there is a consensus on his foreign policy in America, I think we'll have to wait and watch, because, there are, obviously, we have just a year before it was Biden, yes. And he was running American foreign policy through a very different lens. And there is criticism of Mr. Trump in the mainstream of American foreign policy. But clearly his base, what he's doing resonates with his base. And I think if we know anything about his politics, that he does not do center ground politics, middle of the road politics. He does base politics. So the more he will energize his base, the more likely it is that base would keep him in control of the Republican Party. And I think that's what ultimately everything that is happening is all about. It's also about
his control over the Republican Party, over his party, yes. and his base. But what is happening now, the return of Trump saw a lot of churn in various strategic theaters across the world. The kind of statements he's made regarding Greenland and the threats that he's given to the European nations, how do you think will that play out? I mean, we can't just dismiss this, right, as another threat, because he's actually following through whatever he says. And right now he's threatened Europe with tariffs, which also shows that Europe, being an American ally, despite that, they will face tariffs and no trade deal and nothing, no alliances coming in the way, no concessions on that. So Europe, this is a wake-up call for Europe too, and they will recalibrate their relationship with the US. But do you think this Greenland threat is very real, and that could be the next volatile stage?
I think you have to take him at face value, and you have to assume that it is real, because he seems
did
very serious.
what he said in Venezuela.
And he is, I think, in some ways, if he believes that this is something that is important for American security, then certainly he will
for world peace. That's what he says.
Press the buttons. So I think this is, in some ways, we have seen Europe recognizing the challenge, and first they started off negotiating with Mr. Trump, and I think very soon they realized that whatever settlement you reach with Mr. Trump is never settled, because he can change it, as he deems fit, and therefore the inherent unpredictability of Mr. Trump's behavior is also something that Europe will have to negotiate going forward, and I think we see them doing that. Europe, we see on the security front, we see how they are projecting power, whatever limited power they have, defense capabilities. Countries like Germany coming into its own in terms of defense and security. recently. We see Mr. Macron talking about independent defense capability for European Union. On the economic front, we see EU signing Mercosur a trade deal. India-EU trade deal is on the cards. So clearly there is a ramping up of European engagement with the rest of the world, and that in an interesting way, one can also see how it opens up space for countries like China and Russia. Now, if you think about it, Canada, where Canadian Prime Minister went to China last week and signed a deal which will allow Chinese EVs to come back to Canada. Now, this was something that over a period of time we were witnessing how the West was pushing back against China, but this divide between US and EU is now creating openings for China. It is also something that Russians would very much like. I mean, what is, if NATO is coming crumbling down because of inherent fault lines, then this is something that Russia would be loving it, because ultimately Russia's grouse was that NATO was expanding.
Is expanding, and even now, I mean, what is happening in Greenland? This is what Russian foreign ministry has said.
Yes,
that NATO is coming closer, and that is endangering the Arctic region.
So in an interesting way, I think there are some openings here. There are some challenges here. I think it's very difficult to frame it in one particular direction, because you can also look at it if you're thinking of China, for example. That look, if what happened in Venezuela, virtually overnight Chinese investments came crashing down because Chinese had invested a lot in Venezuela. The Russians had a great relationship with Maduro, but nothing could save Maduro. And similarly in Greenland, what Mr. Trump is saying that, look, Russians are there, Chinese are here. Why are they here?
But has this emboldened Trump? The Maduro episode also, because, the way nothing could save Maduro. Yeah. So this has emboldened him, and that's how the Greenland, and then help is on the way for Iran.
Yes, I'm sure it has emboldened him. But I think we also saw, for example, that his response to Iran, despite the bravado, has been cautious, because I think the realization that Iran is not Venezuela. Iran has options for retaliation, and Venezuela, of course, it was a specific task that they were doing, taking Maduro out of Venezuela. So I think in some ways he will. And he is also recalibrating in his own way. He's also picking and choosing the fights that he wants to fight. And the world similarly is also trying to find a way to respond. As I was saying, Canada has found a way. European Union is responding. Countries like China have tried to tackle him either by, through a direct trade deal or by inviting him to China. So he'll be going to China later this year. Similarly, Russia has tried to accommodate some of his eccentricities, but at the same time they continue to have a dialogue. You have countries like India that are doing the same. So I think the world seems to be in a similar boat when it comes to Mr. Trump, not knowing what his next step would be, and he has this art of keeping everyone on tenterhooks, which means that every day is a new day when it comes to diplomacy.
And he's clearly enjoying it.
Yes, he's relishing
waiting
it,
and watching, he's relishing it. How is now coming back to India? What should be India's approach, or what is India's approach to navigating this very volatile situation, or the rough sea of international power, especially its relation to America? We've been really hoping for the US-India trade deal, but what European lesson, is that even if you're a partner and an ally, you cannot really trust. No kind of deal will ensure stability. So India needs to be cautious too.
Absolutely. I think all countries have to be cautious, including India, because as we have seen with multiple countries that he has dealt with, there is no predictability in bilateral relationship anymore. And I think that it is harming America's credibility. But that's, for countries, for individual countries, this is a challenge for here and now. That how do you navigate every single day? How do you navigate, a relationship that for many countries has been very critical? For example, for India, this bilateral relationship has been one of the most important relationships. But now we are in a situation where the trust factor has gone down, where the reliability factor has gone down.
Yeah.
So even if tomorrow there is a trade deal, we don't know whether that trade deal would be worth the paper that it is written on. But if it is, even if it is, there are other issues at stake, from strategy, security, defense, to broader people-to-people ties, which again we have seen what is happening with the visas, H-1B visas, immigration patterns, and how the immigration backlash in the US is also against targeting Indians. So I think there are a number of issues here today which are very different in the relationship than they were a few years back. One can make an argument that the structural factors eventually will put the relationship back on track. But what happens in the short to medium term will be, the test of, I think, diplomacy on both sides.
Absolutely. It's a difficult time for India as well, how to negotiate this. Now, India has already stepped back from Chabahar and also limited its, engagement with BRICS. Now, the question is, how will this play out for India, and also the kind of situation that we see in Iran and the US-Iran conflict growing is, of course, not good news for the region and for India. What do you see? How does it play out here, and how should India move forward, or is planning to?
See, I think Iran has always been a very interesting and important factor in US-India relationship. When we were negotiating the trade deal, the nuclear deal with the US, Iran used to come again and again. And people used to, Americans used to talk about Iran, that look, India has a relationship with Iran. What kind of a relationship that is? Although if you look at the substance of the relationship, of course, Iran's inability to normalize its ties with the rest of the world has cast a shadow over what India can do with Iran.
Yeah.
So whether it is Chabahar port, for all the investment that India has made, the port remains a work in progress, primarily because Iran is not trading with the rest of the world. Iran is under sanctions. So, we have made that investment, but that investment is at a standstill. There are good reasons for India to invest in Chabahar. There are good reasons for India and Iran to work together on Chabahar. Central Asia, Afghanistan, limiting China's role, giving India alternative trade routes. But I think ultimately, unless Iran comes to some sort of its stability both within itself and also in with the region, it becomes very difficult for India to take that relationship beyond what it exists today. And so the ball in some ways is in Iran's court. India can only do so much, and particularly now when Trump administration has been very transactional. In the past, we have had administrations that have understood the logic of India's engagement with Iran. Trump, to be fair, in the first, we have seen last year, they did give us a waiver on Chabahar.
Yes.
So, but that waiver is coming to an end, and that then India will have to see what to do with Chabahar, for example, and how to move forward with this project, which is important.
So you say that this wasn't really, it didn't make sense for India to continue in Chabahar, or how do you see this? Because there's been a lot of criticism too of India backing out from Chabahar and being under US pressure.
I think. I don't think India has, or it seems to me that India has not backed away from its commitment in Chabahar. After all, that in the first stage we completed and we were on to the second stage. I think the question is, what do you do from here? What do you do now? And given the circumstances, it seems to me that this is the only option available, because we have to wait and watch and wait for things to settle down. Because unless things settle down, if let's imagine, what is happening in Iran at the moment, it's not as if the first priority for Iranians is Chabahar. The first priority at this point is to first get their act together and get the what is happening within Iran under control. And then you have on top of it Trump administration that will try to use this, or is trying to use this as an opportunity to push back against the Iranian regime. So I think every other actor is falling between these two verticals. Now, similarly, for example, you can think of China, right? China in Venezuela. What did China do? after all that investment, you couldn't do nothing because it was largely became a conversation between Venezuela and America, Trump. So in this sense also, I think unless things settle down within Iran, unless there is a level of normalcy in Iran, I think the project in any case will be at a standstill. There is nothing that is going to happen to the project.
But do we see that normalcy? I mean, how far do you think that normalcy was going to take time? Definitely. There is putting an end to it immediately. And also with the American interference, one of the basic questions is how much can America interfere there? And what kind of interventions do we see? When he says help is on way, are we talking about military? Are we talking about other non-kinetic involvements? We've seen how Starlink has been provided internet connections or also fueling the revolution that's going on. So what's the kind of engagement or the level of engagement that we can see, American engagement in Iran?
Whatever evidence so far is, I think he has backed off. It seems on the face of it. I think he has taken some victory by saying that, look, I threatened them and they did not execute the people that I said they were about to execute. And that's a victory for him. And that's he has drawn a red line. It seems to me as of now. So I think unless things really deteriorate internally, I don't foresee a possibility where there will be any kind of military intervention because I think America, certainly Mr. Trump knows that his base doesn't want any more wars in the Middle East because that's how he came to power, saying I'm going to end wars. So and any kind of engagement in Iran is not going to be the Venezuela-like engagement. Right? It's going to be very, very different level of engagement. So I think he seems to have worked out an arrangement whereby he said something and the Iranians responded and said...
They also threatened.
And they said, look, there was nothing. We were not going to execute these people. And so why all this bluster? And both sides took some victory points from this. And then they said, all right, we'll go back to... But I think the bigger question in Iran remains one of domestic stability and domestic turmoil that has happened in the last few weeks. If that continues, then I think certainly it's a challenge for Iran's partners. It's a challenge for everyone in the region because it has a cascading effect in the region and a region which is so much in turmoil.
Sure.
You add another layer of complexity to it, and I think India would be hoping that doesn't happen because for India, like for many other countries, Middle Eastern stability is a big big factor in the way its energy security, it's in the way its diaspora security, in the way its economic security is linked.
That brings me back to the big question and summarizing it all. We are in 2026. 2025 saw a lot of disruptions in the global geopolitical order. In 2026, the start has been very volatile. Where do you see the world headed? I mean, there will be another big war, but there'll be many wars from what it looks like. And how will this play out really? What is happening right now and how will this unfold?
I think greater disruption is something that surely can be expected. And the reason is very simple because where we call international system an anarchic environment. It has become even more anarchical in a sense that what the world and the world's leadership over the last 7 to 8 decades they tried to do after Second World War was to try to create a system, howsoever inefficient, howsoever unworkable, where you had multiple institutions, where you had some degree of predictability in relationships when it comes to trade, when it comes to technology cooperation, investments, etc., when it comes to some level of interstate engagement. An attempt was made to create an order where a certain degree of predictability ensues. I think today we are in a world where institutions are no longer working. Those and the leadership, void is very palpable. If you think of big powers and the leadership that they have at this point, it doesn't seem to be a leadership that is visionary or that wants to, shape the world. I think rather we are living in the age of leaders who are more focused on domestic political
Inward.
gains. And that inward orientation is casting a shadow over the larger global networks and global engagements. And I think when you have such a situation, when you don't have an overarching authority or kind of an overarching authority managing, in some ways trying to pull the world in a certain direction, challenges only mount. And now that we are talking of this Trump's Board of Peace seemingly replacing UN Security Council, I think we are in a very dystopian world where you can have money by power and money by governance power of the world in the world. And I think this means that the challenges to this order will continue, both from big powers, which we have talked about, but then using that, you will also have other countries, which in their own ways will challenge the system. So I think the systemic repercussions are going to be quite huge when you have the leader of the system, a seeming leader of the system, itself questioning the very system that it created. You can imagine the rest of the world then, and all the dissatisfied lot of the world then saying, well, we always told you so that this is not a workable system. So let's move towards a new system. And whenever you have this transition, this is always a volatile transition.
So that system was also basically, if we now look back and if America was the leader of creating that system, it was serving their interests more. And now is the time, what I understand, we can best describe it as anarchy. That's what it is. Inward looking, more of nationalism that we see everywhere. And it's come down to me and mine, right?
Yes,
rather than looking at the big picture.
And that's a recipe for more disruption and more conflict.
So these are times of disruptions and renegotiations and an emerging new order. That's where the world is headed right now. So this is why it's a volatile time. Thank you so much for explaining that to us, Harsh. And that's all that we have time for on this episode of the Ideas Factory.